Hi, I'm Josh, and I am so grateful you've chosen to spend some of your very valuable time with me as I talk about the games that I played in February. It was a good month of gaming with 10 unique games being played. However, it was also the month where I ended up in Emerge with my bowel issues. So a couple of these games were actually played on my phone in app version. But as usual, I'm going to go through these 10 games in order of my lowest rated game to my highest rated game, and let's get straight into it. But before I talk about the games I played, let me talk for a quick second about the incoming and outgoing items. So I did sell a game. I sold my Funkoverse strategy game Harry Potter 100, plus the expansion, which was called 101. And this is a game that I had purchased a couple of Christmases ago for my older son, Evan, as a basic introduction to miniature style gaming. However, we played it one time and it just wasn't a hit, so I managed to sell it off in February. As for acquisitions, I have to give a quick shout out to a friendly local gaming store called C&C Gamebridge in Cambridge, Ontario, Canada. I was at my gastroenterologist's office following up from my trip to the hospital, and I was driving home, and my path took me right by this shop, which is a wonderful little shop. It's actually the game store where my kids last summer had spent a week in game camp, and they had just had an absolutely wonderful time. The owner, Jeff, and the people who were helping him out with the camp there did a fantastic job with them. In particular, my younger son Wyatt really enjoyed the game HeroClix, so I bought him some HeroClix stuff, but we didn't have a map to play on, so I asked Jeff if we could purchase a map, and he just pulled one out from his own personal supply and gave me the map, said, "Don't worry, bother paying for it, just enjoy it with your son there," so that was pretty awesome. But anyways, like I said, I was going to be driving right back to the store, but I was a little conflicted because if you watched my previous kind of personal update, you'll know that my financial situation right now is kind of garbage, and I just found out today that my basement renter is going to be moving out, which has me stressing like mad, wondering how on earth I'm going to pay the bills. But basically my leisure budget, my budget for purchasing games and books and stuff, is right about zero at the moment. And so I thought, is there any point in stopping if I got no money to spend? But I thought it'd be fun to at least look around, and I do want to at least purchase some bases for some minis for another little gaming project I'm working on, which I'll talk about at some other future time. So I stopped into C&C Gamebridge and looked around a bit, went up to the counter and said to Jeff that I was interested in purchasing some mini bases, and he said, "Okay, well, what size do you want?" And I was like, I'm not sure. I just kind of want to eyeball it. So he put a couple sizes on the counter, and I said, "Oh, that size looks good." And he said, "How many do you need?" And I said, "Roughly 2 dozen would be fine." So he just turns to his personal desk, grabs a couple dozen bases, puts them in plastic bags for me, hands them to me, and I'm like, "All right, how much?" He's like, "Don't worry about it, just take the bases." I'm like, "I got to give you something." And he's like, "No, just keep coming shopping here." So I was like, I was amazing. I was in poor health coming back from my doctor's appointment, feeling lousy. I am broker than broke, but I came out of there with these free bases that Jeff gave me, and it made me emotional because I'm like, it's such a small thing, but on the other hand, just the position I'm at right now with my health and my finances and everything else in life, just that generosity meant so much to me. So I do want to take a second to recommend C&C Gamebridge to anybody who's in the Waterloo region area of Southern Ontario here. Definitely go in, check them out. They have board games, they have Magic the Gathering Pokemon, they have minis gaming supplies and paints and paintbrushes and all that great stuff. So it's one that I highly recommend. But let's talk about the games that I played, starting with my number 10 of the month, a game called King and Assassins. It is one that I often play these days in the app form on my computer. I got a Steam edition from Asmodee, and my kids and I decided to play it on the computer. We played a couple games the other day, and it's a game that I only rate 6.5 out of 10, and so it would not normally stay in my collection. Anything basically under about 7.5 out of 10 is one that I definitely seriously consider about putting in the to sell pile. However, there's just something about this little game that I don't know what it is exactly about it that makes me want to keep hanging on to it. It's just a simple, quick-playing, asymmetrical two-player game that I enjoy playing, even though it's very lopsided in favor of the assassin player. The king player definitely has a really hard time winning the game, but, well, I just keep hanging on to it, and I'm glad that I have it both in physical format and on my computer there. Next up is a game I played with Paul, and it is Cthulhu Realms, which is a kind of newer edition of the old two-player deck-building game Star Realms. So Star Realms is one that I've talked about in previous months. I have it on my shelf here. I've played it with Evan a few times, and it's one that I've enjoyed over the years. It's another one I have on my computer, actually, in app format. But Cthulhu Realms takes Star Realms and adds a lot of things to the game, to the point where each turn you take, especially as the game progresses, turns can take a little while as you try to remember how to match up all the symbols on your cards properly and try not to forget any special abilities you're triggering. And in that way, it kind of makes Star Realms a little bit more complex, maybe adds a little bit more depth to the game. It definitely makes it a longer game. I decided to go with an initial rating of 7 out of 10. I rate Star Realms 6.5 out of 10. So I think the added elements of Cthulhu Realms make it a little bit better, although I'm not exactly sure if it makes it better or just more complex and longer. Paul rated it 6.5 out of 10, so it wasn't a massive hit. There's also another version of the game called Hero Realms, which actually has the most appealing theme to me because it's kind of a fantasy theme, whereas Cthulhu Realms obviously is the horror Cthulhu theme. Star Realms is the original space sci-fi type of theme, but I've never played the Hero Realms version, so I wouldn't know how it compares amongst the three. The next one to mention is one I played with Paul, and it's actually a game that I had purchased for Paul, and this is The Fox in the Forest Duet, and it is a fascinating game in that not only is it a two-player trick-taking game, but it is a cooperative two-player trick-taking game, which is really unique and interesting, and it works really well. The game I played with Paul, we actually played a perfect game where we won the game in round 2 of a game that is supposed to normally go 3 rounds, because literally every single turn we took, we managed to remove one of the items from the little track where you're trying to remove all the items before you run out of time. And so literally every play we made was a perfect play, and we played a 100% perfect match, which was pretty cool. I'm kind of proud of Paul and I for that. It just shows how well the two of us work together. So I rate Fox in the Forest Duet 7 out of 10. Paul rates it 7.5 out of 10. And it's just such an interesting little game you can throw in your pocket, take down to the pub, and play together as a cooperative game. Next we get back to chess again. I played it both physically with Evan and on my phone while I was sitting in Emerge for 12 hours. If you've ever sat in a chair for 12 hours, that's an incredible form of torture, let alone when you have diverticulitis and Crohn's disease and are in immense pain. Anyways, I've played it to help pass the time in Emerge, and I'm super happy that I've been able to keep playing this with Evan. I rate chess 7 out of 10. What else can I say about it? Before I talk about my higher rated games of the month, let me send out a huge thank you to my Patreon supporters, especially to my higher tier supporters, Abe O, Joanna, King Booty, and most of all my highest tier supporter, Osmonda's Perfect. Your support means the world to me, especially with things are the way they are right now, like I mentioned earlier. Every little bit you're giving to me is just helping me to not lose my house, to keep paying the bills, and it really impacts me in a very meaningful and a very positive way, so I am so grateful and thankful to you. Now I'm going to talk about a game that I played in physical format on the tabletop, but I played solo. And I swear, I'm not a solo gamer. Just not something I'm generally interested in. A huge part of the hobby of board gaming for me is just gathering around a table with loved ones and creating a shared narrative and matching wits together and just having a good time with other people. But for some reason, over the past couple months, I've found myself playing some solo games, which if you've watched my January games played, you'll have seen me doing some of that there too. But this one that I decided to pull out was Hardback, a word game that's kind of a cross between Dominion, the deck building game, and Scrabble, the word game. So basically, Hardback is one where you use cards to create words and score points and acquire even more and better cards. And each of the cards has letters on them that you use to spell words. So I have a fascination with word games, but I struggle because I am very prone to analysis paralysis when I play them. So one nice thing about playing solo is I can sit there and think for as long as I want and not feel stressed that I'm holding up the opponent or opponents, or even if we're playing it cooperatively, because the interesting thing about hardback is you can play it competitively against other players, or you can play it cooperatively against the game, or play it solo against the game. So that's really one cool aspect of hardback. But in any case, when I'm playing it solo, I can sit there and think of the very best words that I can possibly come up with. Now, the one time that Paul and I played it cooperatively together, we found it really hard. We got smoked by the game. However, when I played solo, I won relatively easily, and there's a couple of reasons for that. One is I did add a couple of the extra modules into the game which allow other ways to score points, so I did score points more easily. However, the way the game is structured, it's going to be exponentially easier the fewer players you have in the game. And that's because with the way the game plays out, no matter how many players you're playing with, whether it's just one or several, basically the player will take a turn, then the game will take a turn, then the next player will take a turn, then the game will take a turn, and so on, so that the game is getting a turn every other player turn. Now, because it's a deck building game, the more time goes on, the more cards you collect into your hand that allow you to spell better words and score more points. So the game will naturally start with the game going off to a lead, but then as players acquire better cards and build a better deck, they'll hopefully catch up and reach the winning number of points before the game does. And so when you're playing just solo, your deck becomes more powerful much more quickly because you're taking that every other turn with the game. You're quickly acquiring the good cards and building a better deck, whereas even with one other player playing cooperatively together, it's going to take you twice as long for the two of you to build up good decks to score big points against the game. And then if you were to add more players, it would take even longer to build up those good decks. So it's unfortunately structured in a way where it really rewards you just playing with fewer players. Now, I'm sure there are ways to kind of add to the challenge and make it more difficult and whatnot, but I was kind of surprised with how easy it ended up being to beat the game as a solo experience, but I still had a lot of fun with it. I score hardback 7.5 out of 10, and when I had played with Paul previously, he gave it a 7 out of 10. If you're into word games and deck building games, this is the perfect mix of the two. But I'm not done talking about solo gaming, because I also got back to a game that I was playing last month. I was playing the tutorial scenarios a little bit, but this time I pulled out a real mission with V-Commandos, which has now been renamed V-Sabotage due to legal reasons. But like I mentioned in January, this is a cooperative game of World War II commando missions where the aim is not to go running in there blasting, but to use stealth to sneak around various German facilities and sabotage them, or rescue people, or escort certain people, or whatever the mission requires you to do, and then get back out safely. Hopefully without being discovered and triggering the alarm and bringing in a whole bunch of more German soldiers. And so it's played on a very individual soldier level where you each have your character with your gear and your abilities, and you're using action points to do the best you can to get the mission accomplished and stay quiet and not get caught. So it's a fascinating game. It definitely scratches my history itch. It is very fascinating in that it really is built around that stealth aspect. And the other fun thing is I got to play it two-player with Paul as well. So not only did I play it on my own, but the two of us played it together. We played a mission with, I think it was one commando each. I don't think we did two commandos each. And it was a ton of fun, but I'm not sure if this is one of the only games that I think might be best solo, because it's very much a puzzly game. You're looking at the layout of the board, the mission you have to accomplish, the number of action points you have to move around and do what you need to do, the gear you're carrying, and it's all a big puzzle as to how to kind of figure out how to accomplish that the best. Of course, there's luck involved with rolling dice and drawing cards and hoping that you don't get discovered with the roll of a die. But then the other aspect of it is, in many of these missions, you can lose one or more of your team of commandos. As long as at least one gets out safely, then you can accomplish the mission. However, if you're playing with other players and their commando dies, then if you're the only one left, and you got to, I guess, finish up the mission on your own and try to get out as best you can. So in that aspect, it might be a little better as a solo experience, even though I don't consider it to be a particularly great victory if you've lost commandos but still accomplished the mission. Sometimes it happens and it's necessary, but in any case, I guess my point is it is pretty fun solo, and I did enjoy it two-player with Paul. I rate the game 7.5 out of 10, though I'm kind of pushing up towards an 8, and I don't know if further plays will push it up to 8. Paul does rate it 8 out of 10, so it's certainly a cooperative experience that we both enjoyed quite a bit. Next up is the other one I played in app version on my phone while sitting in the emergency department, and that is Mr. Jack Pocket. The whole Mr. Jack series of games here is one that I consider my number 3 game of all time. The best of the bunch for me is Mr. Jack in New York. It's the one that I generally consider to be my number 3 game. The Pocket Edition takes what's already kind of a fairly simple small game and shrinks it down even more and simplifies it even further and makes it just a really challenging two-player experience. Don't let this tiny little box fool you. There's a lot of brain burn to be found in this little package here. The app version on the phone is really well done too, so I enjoyed playing both as the detective player and as the criminal player. It's a hidden identity game where the criminal player is trying to not be discovered before time runs out, whereas the detective has their 8 suspects in front of them. I think there's 8 of them, although there might be 9 in the Pocket version here. But in any case, the detective player is trying to tactically move around the board in such a way that they can look through alleyways and narrow down the list of suspects and try to get it down to that one final suspect. I rate Mr. Jack Pocket specifically 8 out of 10, whereas I rate Mr. Jack in New York a perfect 10 out of 10. So Pocket isn't quite as good, but it is still very highly rated and one that I enjoy both in physical and in app form. Into my top 3 games of the month now, we have another game where I played two-player cooperatively with Paul, and that is Codenames Do It! It's another word game, but instead of trying to spell words, now you're trying to get your opponent to guess specific words among a list of words that are on the table before time runs out, and without getting them to accidentally guess the one word that is the assassin that will immediately cause a loss. So it's Codenames in two-player cooperative version, and it works amazingly well. I like it even better than the original Codenames game. I absolutely love it. Paul and I played twice. We lost the first time. The second game, we managed to squeak out a win on the very final turn of the game, and just the amount of fun I had with it again prompted me to raise my rating even higher from 8.5 to now a 9 out of 10. Paul rates it 8.5 out of 10, so he thinks very highly of it as well. And just as a cooperative two-player experience, it's just so much fun and such a brain-burny game, trying to come up with just the perfect clues to give your opponent, trying to guess the right word when they're giving clues back to you to not mess it all up. So it's so tense and so fun. And wouldn't you know it, the second last game of the month here is another cooperative game I played with Paul, and that is Spirit Island. Just an incredibly amazing game. This is not for new gamers, not for the faint of heart. It is a highly complex game, not necessarily with the way things are playing out on the board specifically, but with how you are playing your specific spirit and your specific hand of cards as you're deck building your special deck and trying to use your slow powers and fast powers to the best of your abilities and make it all work together, all while your teammates are trying to do the same thing with their unique spirits. And the game is just amazing. There is actually also a great version on Steam that I've played on my computer before and had fun with. I rate Spirit Island 9 out of 10. Paul rates it 8.5 out of 10. So identical ratings to Codenames Duet, although if it comes to ranking them, I guess Spirit Island just edges out Codenames Duet. Although even saying so, I don't know. They're both such amazing games in their own way. Definitely Codenames Duet is very fast playing, whereas Spirit Island is not. There's a lot going on here, but it is a lot of fun for people who want to really have a mental workout and really work to put together a deck of cards and special abilities and get them all working together. And then finally, the very best of the month was Clank Catacombs. Yes, we did get back to Catacombs again. I talked in, I think it was January, about just how much I enjoyed this version of Clank that incorporates an explorable variable map, and as well as a couple other unique elements like freeing prisoners. We actually had to play it twice because in our first game I died so fast. I got this one card early on that was a powerful card that added a lot of clank each time it came up in my hand, and in the past I've found it fairly easy to get rid of damage through various card effects, and I don't know if I've ever really died early in the game to the point where I scored 0 points, because if you die when you're kind of not deep in the dungeon, you can still score the points you've collected, but not the 20 bonus points for escaping the dungeon. In this case, though, I wasn't even close to getting out of the depths of the dungeon, and I just accumulated so much clank and so much damage so quickly, and managed to surprise myself with how quickly I died off. In the second game, I got out of the dungeon, but Paul died. However, he managed to get high enough or close enough to the exit so that when he ran out of life points, he was able to be rescued and score his points, despite not scoring those 20 bonus points. And even though he didn't score those 20 bonus points, he still managed to beat me. So I clearly didn't do very well, but I still had a ton of fun with the game. I still rate the game 9.5 out of 10. Paul still rates it 9.5 out of 10. So it is a close to perfection game for both of us, and one that I'm sure we'll keep coming back to in the future. And that's my month of February. Please tell me about you. What games have you been playing recently? What have you been enjoying? Are there any new games you've acquired that you have either been playing or are excited to get to? Or maybe there's a game that's on your radar that you can't wait to pick up. Whatever it is, please don't go down into the comments and do let me know, because I'd love to chat about it. I'd love to keep the conversation going. And thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed all the time that I put into this, please give the thumbs up button a COVID-friendly fist bump for me. And if you didn't enjoy it, go ahead and give me a thumbs down and go into the comments and let me know what you didn't like about it. I'm always open to relatively polite, constructive criticism of how I can improve. And in any case, I just appreciate you being here with me. Cheers. As I talk about the games that I played in the month of February. Oh, I'm so behind on my game videos. Just before I dive into the games played, I want to talk quickly. Just before I dive into the games played, I want to quickly mention. Just before I dive into the games played, I want to quickly mention games sold and acquired, and I thought it might be an interesting introduction to these. And I do. It's just. Now, when I talk about when Paul and I played it solo the one time, we decided to play, or cooperative, outscored the game before the time runs out. In your because I'd love to chat with you about it. I love to. And in terms of acquisitions, can we just start over again?